Hello and welcome to Filling the Sink, a podcast from Catalan News. My name is Lea Beliaeva, and today we're talking about Barcelona Pride. Every year in Catalonia, June and July turn into Pride Month, which is an almost month-long celebration of the LGBTQI plus community with events, talks, demonstrations, and much more that culminate on Saturday, July 20th with the big Pride Parade. The Pride Month isn't just a celebration of the freedom to be yourself, but it's also a moment where the community reminds everyone of the work that still needs to be done. And this year, the main topic of the Barcelona Pride is the LGBTI plus education, under the title Education in Sexual and Gender Diversity, a pending subject. So on today's podcast, we will talk about the need for diversity-focused education in classrooms, and we will also hear from teachers and organizers behind this year's demands. I'm joined after a very long break by Lorcan Doherty. Welcome back, Lorcan.
Thanks, Lea. Happy Pride.
Happy Pride. So, as I just said, the topic of this year's Pride is LGBTI plus education. So, let's just start this podcast off with just some basics. The acronym.
Yeah, so LGBT, that's the easy part, I would say. That's lesbian, gay, bi, and transgender. Then Q, which is queer and questioning. Mm-hmm. I, intersex, and A, asexual. And then the plus is for, well, whatever else you can think of. Pansexual, non-binary, gender fluid.
Exactly, and all the others that we haven't mentioned. And then there is also the flag, or I should rather say the flags.
Yes, yeah, there's a lot of different flags now. I never thought about it. You know, the rainbow flag just seems to me, okay, it's a beautiful metaphor, isn't it? Because, you know, it's a rainbow, or it's something natural, you know, that occurs, that we all experience and all gives us joy when we see it, you know.
It's colourful.
Colourful. And I never thought about the fact that someone had to sit down and design a flag with those colours in it. You know, it seems to me something that has always existed, but no, it's not the flag of any country or whatever. Someone had to sit down and design it, and that was American activist and artist Gilbert Baker, who did so in 1978.
Exactly, and he actually got the inspiration from Harvey Milk, an LGBT activist also from the United States, who said that the community needs some sort of a flag to gather around. But the rainbow flag has many other newer versions, right?
Yeah, especially in recent years. We're starting to see more variations on and additions to the kind of classic traditional rainbow flag. In 2017, the Philadelphia Pride flag added a black and brown stripe, which symbolises people of colour. And just a year later, 2018, the trans flag colours, which are pale blue, pink and white, they were included too, along with the rainbow flag. And that's known as the Progress Pride flag.
And then the latest one, which one is that?
So now we've got the rainbow flag, those other colours that have been added, the black and brown and the blue and pink and white, they kind of make a triangle on one side. There's probably a technical flag term for it. and then inside the triangle, we've got a purple circle on yellow. And this was added. In fact, I have to admit, when I saw it this year at the start of Pride Month, I was like, this is a new one for me, but it kind of felt a bit bad, but it's only been around since 2021. Designed by an intersex activist, Valentino Vecchietti, and she incorporated intersex in the flag with this new edition.
And as we are recording this episode, we are actually in the middle of Pride Month here in Barcelona. And the fact is that Spain is the fourth country in Europe with the most rights for queer people, just behind Malta, Iceland, and Belgium, according to the ILGA Europe rainbow map that they publish every year. So some might argue that everything is fine in Spain. Why do we need this?
Well, first, it's a celebration. You could say, why do we need... Well, you know, why do we need a birthday celebration? Why do we need Christmas, you know? Because it's nice to celebrate things, I would say. But also because LGBT issues have come a long way in terms of, like, you know, the community has really fought for equal rights. But, you know, there's still discrimination. There's still prejudice. Recently, we've started to see headlines around a rise in hate crimes again. Some people are worried that, you know, we may be going backwards a little bit in some things. So for all of those reasons, another aspect of Pride as well is remembering queer history, LGBT history, and those who came before.
For sure. Yeah, and just going back to the rainbow map that I mentioned before, and Spain is the fourth country in Europe with the most queer rights. This map, it reviews the human rights situations. It assesses also what life is like for the LGBT people in every European country. And the queer community in Spain has 76% of the rights that straight people have. So we're not quite there. So there's still a lot of work to be done.
So that's why we need Pride.
Exactly. And as I mentioned before, there's this central theme of the Pride. Last year, it was centered around LGBT seniors, and the year before that, lesbians. And this year, it's all about combating LGBTI phobia in schools.
Yes, Pride organisers want to promote the importance of early education in gender and sexual diversity. So the title, I think you mentioned already, Lea, is Education in Sexual and Gender Diversity, a pending subject or an unfinished subject, you might translate it as. And in their website manifesto, the Pride organisers say that it's time to get to the root of the problem, what they call a deep-seated cultural root in our society that becomes a focus for inequality, hatred and rejection, central to what they call the ideologies of the far-right ultra-Catholic forces. This is what they say. Our existence is still uncomfortable for them, and education is the fundamental pillar from which we can combat violence, misunderstanding, and the enormous misinformation that still exists.
Wow. And you talked to Cathy Payas. She's a queer activist and a former teacher.
Yes, I had a great conversation with Cathy in the LGBTI Centre here in Barcelona. And I started by asking her, why is sexual and gender diversity a pending or unfinished subject?
It's a non-started subject. Even though we've been working with that for more than 10 years now, it's still difficult to bring that perspective into schools. My name is Cathy Payas, and I'm a teacher trainer. I teach teachers to develop programs that include co-education and sexual education. Long ago, when we started, it was like a blank page. We really didn't know how to start, where to start. But we started looking at other countries where some things have been done, like the United States and the United Kingdom. And so we developed a Programa Educativo Escola Rainbow Schools Educational Program, which was very, in some things now that I look back at those years and I think it was a little bit naive, but still it worked. So we could implement it in 2 different schools. And that gave us a lot of knowledge on what was useful and what was not. So we took this program and we presented it to the authorities. And it was not in the line they had the feeling the schools had to go. But still, we are resilient people. So we kept on trying to get this done. We kept on developing materials, teaching materials in our website, in books, videos, and we kept on training teachers. Those of the teachers that wanted to be trained. So some things were done because from the bottom people asked, I want to be trained, I want to know about this. And also students started saying, we want to learn about sexual education. We think it's going to be good for us. We need to have that information. And so the government started thinking, okay, maybe we should do something. We have a new educational law for the whole Spain. That law has been developed here in Catalonia with the Decree 175/2022. And that decree, for the first time, has got the LGBTIQ+, black and white, as we say in Spanish. And that made me cry, I have to admit it. I mean, that was something really, to have those letters standing there in an educational document that was going to be compulsorily followed by all teachers and all schools all over Catalonia. I mean, that is something big, in my view, because it gives you, teacher, the power to act and implement without having fear, right? Or you can bring books to school which talk about diversity, and nobody can stop you because that is compulsory for you, because the law is telling you you have to do that. But there are still many challenges to face, because even though you have that, if teachers are not trained well enough, they will not have the courage to bring that subject to schools. So there is a lot to be done, because there are more than 20,000 teachers in Catalonia. So how can you do that, right? So we need a plan. We need a government plan, and this topic has to be in the agenda. We need training, but we also need the whole society to start looking at it as something important. Because it seems that that's something that's got to do with LGBTIQ people, feminists, that, you know, they are upset with the world. And people need to understand that what we're trying to do is to make life easier for everybody and happier for everybody.
Thanks to Cathy Payas for speaking with us. I think she's really, really interesting to listen to, and she had so many great points. I really find her, as many of you maybe can hear.
You're fangirling now, Lea.
I am. But one thing that I was wondering is why more schools haven't joined this Programa Educativo Escolas Rainbow, this Rainbow Schools program.
Yeah, I did put that to Cathy, and she said that she thinks it's because teachers were scared because of the lack of provision in law. Mm-hmm. You know, they were worried that if they started to teach diversity issues in the classroom, that they would get some criticism, or more than criticism, that they might even be sued, whether by external organizations or by, you know, parents of children. So that's why there was reluctance from teachers, perhaps. And that's why that the recent laws that she mentioned, Spain-wide law and maybe especially the Catalan decree from just a couple of years ago, are so important, because it gives teachers that security that they, by law, not only can teach this, but have to teach this.
Right. And I kind of understand that when you work as a teacher, maybe, well, you have so many things that you have to prioritize. And if LGBT and diversity is seen as like a luxury or something extra, maybe you won't prioritize it. Or as a teacher, maybe you don't have the tools to teach it in a way that you feel safe with.
Yeah, I mean, and that's why Cathy kept coming back to, you know, we need to train teachers, we need to provide them with materials, especially books and things, picture books for very young children, kindergarten age and primary school age, are really, really useful. For example, for children who maybe don't see that much diversity in their own day-to-day lives, that they see it in a book. And that could be, for example, Cathy herself was inspired when she had her own child. When her son was young, she said, well, there's not enough books for him to learn about this, so I'm going to write some books as well. And she created this little series of books about Alba, who has two mums. But it's not the plot in these little stories or anything. It just, Alba happens to have two mums there in the background doing typical mum things, you know. Okay,
so that's really representation that you get to see that we, as older millennials, we didn't even see.
Yeah, it was funny because it got me thinking that I don't really remember LGBT characters. I don't remember queer or trans characters in books when I was growing up.
No, for sure.
So the fact that that's changing is obviously a very positive thing and reflects reality.
It really does. And the Barcelona Pride also posted this video on YouTube from the San Felipe Neri primary school.
This is brilliant. We had great fun watching this in the office, didn't we?
It was a lot of fun. So it starts off with these kids waving at the camera, and then an adult asking the question, what happens when you teach sexual and gender-based diversity? Let's have a listen.
Yeah, so the kids, they're asked about a range of things. What do you think about girls playing football? Or what would happen if a boy came to school one day and said they felt like a girl? Or how would you feel if a classmate had two mammies or two daddies? And adorable reactions and heartwarming as well.
Yes.
I would say.
And then there was a couple of questions that really made us laugh, Lorcan. One question was, what is diversity? And how did the kids react to this question?
Yeah, well, someone's just saying, I have no idea, and someone's saying, maybe it's a party. We were kind of saying that it shows that maybe the abstract concept of diversity isn't something that means a lot to these children yet.
Yeah, they don't, maybe it reflects that they don't teach abstract concepts, but just how you practically use these ideas,
Treat
right?
everyone the same.
Exactly.
And, these kind of fundamentals that, should apply to everyone.
And we wanted to know more about what it's like to teach sexual and gender-based diversity inside the classrooms. So, Lorcan, you talked to Olga Sanchez, who is a teacher at the San Felipe Neri school, which is this rainbow school, and Teo Pardo, who is a trans man and a teacher.
Yes, it was great to speak to Olga and Teo. Olga teaching in that primary school, as you mentioned, and Teo, who is a biology teacher in secondary school here in Barcelona.
Jo soc profe de biologia.
Teo Pardo is a biology teacher at the Institut La Sagrera Sant Andreu, a public secondary school in Barcelona. Before qualifying as a teacher around 5 years ago, he spent over a decade visiting schools to give workshops on sexual education.
A mi em tocava treballar amb els nois.
These workshops were often given separately to girls and boys, and Teo worked with the boys, he explains. A part of me thought, what legitimacy do I have, as a man without a penis, to talk to these boys about sexuality? So at the start, I wouldn't tell them I was a trans man, he says.
En algun moment vaig pensar, escolta'm, això és molt contraproduent.
These sessions with teenage boys, however, would often descend into a pit of toxic masculinity. Teo discovered that his way of breaking this dynamic was to share his own experience. At some point, normally when Teo would explain to the boys how sensitivity and genitalia work, when it came to the vulva, there was always someone, Teo tells me, who would say, "Hey Teo, you've seen plenty, haven't you? Because you fuck a lot, right?" Teo's response, "No, actually, it's not that I've seen a lot of them. I'm a trans man and I have one, so I know perfectly well how they work." Then, whoa, he says, silence. Suddenly, mouths open, students elbowing each other. But then, the most magical thing, suddenly, they start to put their hands up and he'd start to hear new voices and questions from boys who had been too shy to speak before.
Jo crec que el que hem aconseguit no és que s'hagi...
Olga Sanchez is a primary school teacher at Institut Escola Sant Felipe Neri. For around a decade, this school in Barcelona's Old Town has been part of the Rainbow Schools project. It's true that our students who have been working within this framework for many years have a certain sensitivity or a more critical view towards information they find in books or information they receive externally, Olga tells me. They're more aware of actions or slogans, songs or content that could be discriminatory. I ask Olga, has she felt any pushback or resistance from parents, for example?
Moltes.
A lot, she says.
Va haver-hi una mare que no entenia el que jo li explicava.
At one meeting for new families last June, there was a child's mother, Olga says, who didn't understand what they were trying to teach. She tried to convince Olga that what she was telling her was counterproductive because her daughter was very young. She said I was going to talk about sex, Olga says. I told her, I'm not going to talk about sex. I'm going to talk about people, how they express themselves, who they love, but I'm not going to talk about what sexual practices we should have. Unlike Teo, who in secondary school gives specific classes on sexual education, with Olga in primary school, it's more about taking any and every opportunity to teach the young children about diversity.
Hi ha uns cossos, uns tenen unes coses, uns altres tenen unes altres. I després cadascú...
We talk about the human body, Olga tells me. I wouldn't say, this is a woman's body, or this is a man's body, but rather, there are bodies, some have certain things, others have others. And then, inevitably, the children start saying to you, this is a boy, this is a girl, because I'm a boy and I have a penis. And you say, well, but there are boys who don't have a penis. It's not that you have to dedicate a specific amount of time to diversity each week, Olga says, but rather that you have to take advantage of every occasion you can to advance this sense of diversity.
Em vaig quedar embarassat fa un parell de cursos i estant a l'institut, clar, els meus alumnes...
Teo tells me how, a couple of years ago, he was pregnant. And, being in high school, of course the students noticed. And it was very interesting, he tells me, how they responded to it, extremely naturally. In the end, Teo says, sometimes working on diversity isn't so much about making an effort to do a lot of workshops, but simply to allow the diversity that exists to be seen.
Thanks to Olga and Theo for speaking with us.
Yeah, it was really great to hear their perspectives. I really enjoyed chatting to them. And something else that Theo said that stuck with me was how we're always looking for famous LGBT references to teach about in schools. But
like people who are LGBT activists or something like that.
Yeah,
right?
who've done really great things. But what he thinks is important is that anyone can be a reference for, young people.
Right.
Quite often, teachers.
And I think it's really empowering that he says that anyone can be an LGBT reference.
Yeah, he says you don't have to be an LGBT person to be an LGBT reference. You can do it by simply being yourself. That can be wearing the clothes that you want to wear. It's about expressing yourself truly.
And you also talked about discrimination, right?
Yeah, I asked him, as a trans teacher, has he faced discrimination? And he said, luckily, no, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't happen. Obviously, everyone has a very different experience. And he says, do you know that he thinks it doesn't really depend on the kids that you're teaching. It depends on the adults, maybe other teachers, the principals in the schools, parents. He says that is where the discrimination comes from rather than from the children. That's his experience anyway. And the big change that he's noticed now compared to 15 years ago when he started going into classroom and giving workshops is this issue of visibility, where now everyone knows what trans is, whereas 15 years ago that wasn't the case.
Yeah.
And now, okay, they might not know a trans person, but they know what it means and they know that trans people exist and are part of society. And he says that's a really significant change that he's noticed during his career.
Well, I like his really positive outlook because he was also very optimistic about the future. And now it's time for the Catalan phrase of the week. Lorcan, I've been looking forward to asking you this question for months. So what is it?
This week's Catalan phrase is paper mullat.
So literally wet paper.
Wet paper, paper mullat, which you could say means useless, not worth the paper it's written on. And I actually came across it on the Pride website when they were saying that what we need now are political actions so that the laws already written don't become paper mullat.
Paper mullat, useless or not worth the paper it's written on. And that's all we have time for today. Thanks for listening. Be sure to subscribe to Filling the Sink wherever you get your podcast if you haven't already. Thanks again to Katy Payas, Olga Sanchez, and Theo Pardo for speaking with us. Thanks to you, Lorcan. Great to have you back again.
Thanks to you, Lea.
And we'll be back again next week with another episode of Filling the Sink. On behalf of the team here at Catalan News, I'm Lea Beliaeva, wishing you a great weekend. Fins aviat. Adeu.